Please find seats. David Pinchas ben Zarach Dov, an extraordinary individual, beloved husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, brother, healer, servant of God. Dr. David Bryk leaves behind a beautiful and precious legacy, and we will share an appreciation of his life, the life he led with great sense of dignity, with great honor brought to himself, his loved ones, and to the Jewish people, honor to us all through the manner in which he lived. We will share that appreciation with his wonderful sons in a few moments. We will begin this honor and service with Tehillim, led by Rabbanim Chashuvim of the family. I'd like to call upon Rav Herschel Billet to read the first chapter of Tehillim.
Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzas rishayim u'b'derech hatayim lo omad u'b'moshav leitzim lo yoshav ki im b'soras Adonai chetzo u'b'soraso yegeh yomam v'layla v'hayo ke'eit shasul al pal yimayim asher piryo yitain b'ito v'yoleu lo yibol v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach lo chen ha'rishayim ki im kamotz asher tidefenu ruach al kein lo yokumu rishayim b'mishpat v'chatayim ba'adas tzadikim ki yodei Adonai derech tzadikim B'derech Rishayim Toved. I don't know. I'll look around and let you know. Thank you.
Rabbi Shlomo Hachberg.
Bismillah David. Adonai mi'agur bi'alecha mishkan b'har kodshecha. V'lechamim fol tzedek v'daver ames v'ulvavo. Lo regal al lishona, lo asol reihu ra, v'charpol raso al krovo. V'zeh bin av nimas v'yisrael ma'yichabed. Nishbal hara v'lo yomir. Kaspol rasan b'neshef v'shochar al makilo lo kach. Osei le lo yimak liolam.
By Kenneth Hain.
Michtam לדוד, שמני אל כי חסיסי בך, אמרת אדוני אותו טובסי בעלך, לקדושים אשר בארץ המה, ואדירי כל חפצי בם, ירבו עצבוסם אחר מהרו, ועל אסיף נזקיהם מדם, ובעל אסו את שמוסם על צבוסי, אדוני מנוס חלקי וחוסייתו תומיך גורלי, אבל אם נפלו לי בנימים, אף נחלה שפרו עלי, עברי חסד אדוני אשר...
And their children, great-grandchildren, Akiva, Rivka, Moshe, Shifra, and Shana. Grandsons Jonah Bryk and Mark Bryk. beloved son Hillel and Tammy Bryk, their children Darren and Amanda Bryk, their daughter, great-granddaughter Sadie, Bradley Bryk, Andrew Bryk, and Samantha Bryk, grandchildren. David had a particularly warm and a particularly kind mutual relationship with Harriet's children, with Harriet's son Michael and Bonnie and Audrey. He was the consummate gentleman, as we all know, a kind and patient, wise, yet very unpretentious gentleman. Let us now hear from his wonderful children in age order, from Eli, Joel, and then Hillel.
I'd like to first thank all the distinguished Rabbanim who got up and said Tehillim. I know that my dad would never have expected it, but I'm sure he would have appreciated it. And I want to thank all the people who would get up. Again, I would like to thank all the Rabbanim for saying Tehillim. And I would like to thank everyone here who comes out on a Sunday morning to really in a celebration of my father's life. This is not a sad day for me, other than I lost my father, but really a celebration, a very meaningful and important life of a man who left a wonderful legacy and a beautiful family. 30 years ago, I stood exactly at this podium, in this same room, speaking at the funeral of my mother after her untimely passing. Much has happened since that time. Lori and I had 3 more children. The 3 children we had at that time are now older than I was at the time of the funeral. Interestingly, there are a significant number of people in this room who are actually there and who are here again today. For those few who saw me on that day and have not seen me since and don't no longer recognize me, well, I did my best, but 30 years does a lot of damage. My father was a very quiet and a very humble man, but he was also recognized for extraordinary intelligence. He was a modest man, but he was a pioneer in a couple of different areas, both in his profession of diagnostic radiology and in the really early stages of modern orthodoxy as it relates to Torah and Maddah, the blending of strict religious Orthodox observance and rigorous scientific professionalism. Beginning 60 years ago, he began to write scientific papers and eventually published over 200 scientific articles and abstracts in peer-reviewed journals in the fledgling area of röntgenographic clinical imaging, particularly in gastrointestinal radiology. And he is one of the giants who set the stage for the tremendous technological advances that have now helped cure millions around the world. At the same time, he was rigorous in his adherence to halacha, to Torah, and to the study of Torah, despite all obstacles. I mean, today it's very common to see people, Orthodox Jewish physicians in hospitals, guys with yarmulkes in medical school, but this was 1949, and it was extremely rare, and it was very poorly received. But he persisted despite all obstacles, and he really plowed the field for those many who would come after him. My father was born in 1929 at the end of the year, just a few weeks after the stock market crash and the Great Depression. This Shabbos would have been the 76th anniversary of his bar mitzvah. His parents were very poor. They could not afford to send him to yeshiva. He attended public schools his whole life. But his father was a Malamed, a Hebrew teacher, and taught him at home. My father was a child prodigy. There are many stories of the things that he could do as a child. My favorite one was that at age 5, he learned the Haftorah in a shul for the congregation in Borough Park. In those days, I guess they used to let underage, not bar mitzvah boys do it. Now, of course, it was Parshas Re'eh, which is the shortest Haftorah of the year, but it's still pretty impressive for a kid in kindergarten. He skipped 2 years in elementary school, and he graduated public high school at age 15. He excelled in all subjects, and he was, for some reason, completely fluent in Latin, which would have been great if he was a conservative religious Catholic, but for a nice Jewish boy from Borough Park, not so much. He then went on to college and started college. When he matriculated City College, he was still 15 years old. This was 1945. World War II had just ended, and there was something called the U.S. government had something called the GI Bill, where they subsidized the education of soldiers returning from the battlefields in the European and Pacific theaters. So my father always looked very young, especially when he was a teenager in his 20s. He always looked a few years younger than he was. So when he was 15, starting college, he looked like a bar mitzvah boy. He looked like he was 13 years old. In class, he would be sitting next to soldiers who returned from war who were already in their 20s, but had been so battle-scarred, they looked like they were in their 30s. He looked like he was one of their kids. But he excelled anyway, and he graduated Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude. And then my grandfather, his father, wanted him to become an Orthodox rabbi. My grandmother, on the other hand, said, "You're going to be a doctor." She was tired of being poor. She said Orthodox rabbis, which was true, don't make a living back then. So my grandfather sheepishly suggested that he become a conservative rabbi. But that didn't fly. And as usual, my grandmother won the argument, and he applied to medical school. He actually was accepted to the University of Chicago Medical School, which is still is one of the top 10 medical schools in the United States. But tuition assistance in those days was meager, and he couldn't afford it. So he ended up going to Downstate Medical School, which was free for New York State residents. He graduated with honors from medical school at age 23, did his internship, then was drafted into the Navy, became a physician naval officer. He was actually a Korean War veteran, though he never carried a gun, never left the United States, and he never got on a boat. Then he eventually married my mother at age 25. He did his residency in radiology at Mount Sinai, and eventually went into academic practice in Brooklyn in radiology. At age 39, he became the youngest full professor in the history of Downstate Medical Center at that time, not just in radiology, in any discipline. He practiced for 31 more years, eventually becoming the chairman of radiology at Maimonides, and then he decided to retire at age 70. He decided to retire at age 70 because as much as he loved his profession, he also loved Torah, and he wanted to dedicate the rest of his life to Torah study and davening, which he did every single day until his demise. There were sometimes some quirky overlaps between his love of Torah and personalities of Torah and his medical profession. One that stands out is my mind. When I was a teenager, Moshe Feinstein, who was the Gadol Hador and the great posek, was brought to Maimonides Hospital to be evaluated for pneumonia. And the family and administration of the hospital would only have my father read the chest x-ray. My father came home that day beaming to tell me that story. I was, of course, a wisecracking teenager, and the first thing I said to him when he told me that was, so could you see the neshama on the chest? My father did not appreciate that sarcastic adolescent attempt at humor. My father and I were very close. We always lived near each other. I lived in Lawrence most of my life, in Far Rockaway. Through college, I would come home and I would sit next to him on Shabbos in shul. When I moved to Lawrence, we attended the same shul, Lawrence Cedarhurst, and we sat together every Shabbos morning. And even in the last 12 years, when he was winter in Florida and I was in Manhattan, we would sit in the summers together on Shabbos morning. But my father was just the opposite of today's helicopter parent. He just let me do whatever I wanted. He said, you want to go to college? Fine. You don't want to go to college? Don't go to college. You want to go to the Israeli army? Fine. You don't want to, don't. You want to sit and learn for the rest of your life? It's perfectly okay. I guess he just thought I would make the right choices. Basically, I had to marry my wife in order to find an adult who would tell me what to do. Best choice I ever made. It was very easy for me to be proud of my father because we were in the same profession. He trained hundreds of physicians and technologists over the years, and particularly in the early years when I was in practice, I would meet them all over the place, and we have a little unusual names, so the eventually would recognize it. And they'd say, they realized I was his son, and they would tell me how great he was, how smart he was, how much he taught them, and I was always pleased by that. He would lead by example. He was so good. He was so brilliant. He was so fine. He'd be so rigidly honest that sometimes it would just drive me nuts. But there were things he wasn't. He was not that kind of guy. Everybody knows he was not the kind of guy who would come into a room and start slapping people on the back. That was not my thought. But he was also not interested in accolades. He was not interested in being honored. He never spoke idle gossip. He had no gaiva, no conceit whatsoever. He was impossible to emulate, but I tried very hard. And one of the proudest things I did, I've written many scientific papers myself and published over the years. The first one, I collaborated with my dad, and we co-authored it in 1983. But the most important thing he left was the legacy of his family. He left his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He was a terrific grandfather and great-grandfather, and particularly when he retired, he started teaching them Torah, and he spent a lot of time with the grandchildren teaching them Torah. He helped prepare my two boys for the siyumim when they were bar mitzvah. He even had an opportunity to teach a few of the great granddaughters who were old enough. And if you combine both my father's family and Harriet's family, I added it up. There were approximately 66 people, 66 human beings, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, spouses, who would refer, of all ages, who would refer or would have referred if they're old enough to my father as simply their Saba. And he was very much loved and respected and revered, and he will be sorely missed by all of them. Before I conclude, I just want to thank those who helped take care of him when he was ill, just towards the end, the physicians who were there, and particularly some of the people in the Young Israel Lawrence Cedars when we would come to daven, he had difficulty, and some of his neighbors. And of course, his wife of 29 years, Harriet Bryk, who was with him at his side till the end. My daughters would tell me when they would want to have a bakasha request from God for their children in the last few years, they would call up my father and ask him to daven with them, to pray with them, because they felt he was a tzaddik and he was closer to God. Well, he's certainly closer today. Every year, I'd sit in the summer, so we eventually get to Parshas Balak, and there's the Haftarah is from Micha, from Nevi'im Achronim, and there's that famous last line in Micha, which I would always look at, and it would say, "Ma Hashem daresh mincha." What is Hashem from every Jew? Kiyam asot mishpat, to live honestly and to live justly. V'avat chesed, to lovingly care for people. V'atznei alechet imilakecha, and to walk humbly with your God. And I would be sitting next to my dad every time, and I would look at that pasuk, and I would look at him, and I would say there is absolutely no pasuk in Tanakh that better expressed the way my father lived his life. So I want to take this opportunity, in the presence and with the permission of his neshama that is certainly in this room, and I want to, humbly as I can, address God directly and publicly and say, Ribbono Shel Olam, my father lived his life exactly the way you wished. He's all yours now. Please take good care of him. Tehei nishmato tzurah v'tzurah.
Joe.
Thankfully, Eli went through my father's history because I actually learned a few new things today. So I really appreciate it. I'd like to speak on a more personal level of some of the interactions that I myself experienced in my home the first years of my life. To my immediate family, of course, both near and in Eretz Yisrael, beyond the Rabbanim present, my family and friends, I want to thank everyone for attending today and to give respect to my father. Many of you know that the Dr. Bryk, who lived for somewhat 35 years in Lawrence, and there are a few who remember him from Far Rockaway, but the years that I remember best, of course, are the ones when he played a much larger role in my life, the years that I was growing up. I mean, most people realized at some point in time that my father was brilliant. As Eli said, he graduated high school at the age of 15, City College at 19, downstate, of course, when he was 23. And when I would come home sometimes, and would have a 90 on exam, or in our house, God forbid, an 89, and I would lie in my bed in the room that I shared with Hillel, and I would stare at the ceiling. I would say to myself, why couldn't I just be as smart as my father? Or maybe couldn't I be just half as smart as my father? To me, his intelligence was really his superpower. I mean, when I would go sometimes on a day off from school, and we would go to the hospital together, and my job usually would be to turn on all the light boxes that were in his office. And doctors would come rushing in with piles of x-ray films. And one group of doctors would come up with one diagnosis, and the other group would come up with a second, and my father would lift his glasses, peer closely at all the films, and basically he would give the correct diagnosis. And the winner was elated, the loser was dejected, and I was always amazed. I mean, no one ever disagreed with him. His opinion was absolute. Another amazing attribute of his that I can remember well is that he was always determined. When he would look at his lawn, he would say, I will have the best lawn there is in Far Rockaway. He weeded, he seeded, he fertilized. When you stood in front of our house and you looked to the right and you looked to the left, you knew exactly where our property line, where the life was in the future. He managed to keep a cherry tree alive, a peach tree alive for many years. I don't know how he did it. I mean, supposedly we're having global warming now. The New York winters used to be a lot harsher, and his roses bloomed every season. My father was always decisive. In my relative young teenage years, he decided that we were making Aliyah in 5 years. He had a plan. And the other thing he decided is that we would only speak in Hebrew at the Shabbat day. Now, maybe he did that because we made a lot of noise, and he figured if we could only speak in Hebrew, we wouldn't say much. But the ploy didn't last for very long, but I did learn how to say that I love cherry pie in Hebrew. When we traveled to Israel with the family, we would go on trips, and my father would lead us on what we came to call Moshe Rabbeinu tours. It's basically because only the Kadosh Baruch Hu knew the path that he would travel on. And my father would decide on a derech. He was unwavering. He would never change. Only the complaints of the relative Am that was following him, because we were always thirsty and hungry, and the compassion of my mother would lead us back to the hotel. He was adventurous. Very early in his 20s, he traveled to Europe. He arrived to Israel in 1952. He made a very treacherous trip to Yerushalayim. And when he got there, his relative had saved for him a rationed egg. They figured if an American can make it to Yerushalayim in 1952, he deserves the egg. My father was argumentative. Now, you might not realize that, but it was in a good way. He challenged us when we spoke. We had to defend ourselves. He made us think about and discuss every topic of the day. Until Esty arrived and attended one of our Shabbos meals, I didn't know that it was poor manners to scream at each other over one of the arguments, and the loudest person would win. The other thing I never realized is that I was supposed to eat with my mouth closed. I explained to Esty that, if I was closing my mouth when I was eating, I would not be able to argue with everyone else at the table. But Esty says I'm working on it, but I'm still a work in progress. But our discussions always left someone would have to defend his opinion. And when you defended your opinion with my father, you had to find a book, or more preferably, you had to find a sefer that agreed with you. And we had many books in our homes. We had hundreds of them. And my father collected over the years. In fact, I still remember meeting Chanoch ben Arza, who owned, for those who know Eretz Yisrael, he owned a bookstore in the old city, about 50 feet from the Har Habayit. And my father would subscribe to him, and we would get books shipped to us to our home in Far Rockaway. And we would open a box from Ben Arza. He was so excited. He was like a little child seeing a present for the first time. So, as you might not know, my father really did have a range of emotions. He was not as stoic as you might have thought he appeared. He would get angry at us. I mean, we would misbehave. We were 3 boys. Often he would try to hit us, and usually he would hurt himself, and our mother would turn to us and say, "You look what you did to your father." But at times, he would be sad. The saddest I ever saw him was when my grandfather Zorach Bryk passed away, and my father cried his way through Havdalah. And I think the happiest that I saw my father is when I brought home my acceptance to Tufts Dental when I arrived from Boston. And my father literally jumped up and down the hallway, and he and my mother danced around me in the hallway of our home. But the emotion that I remember most about my father was that he was proud. He was not proud of things that he had done. He was proud of the things that we had done. He was proud of our accomplishment and our success. He was proud of his children, of his grandchildren, of his great-grandchildren. And, maybe because part of his personality was that he really was a Melamed. He taught doctors, he taught residents, he taught us, he taught his grandchildren, but he taught in a way that somehow you would absorb his life's lessons without him having to say anything at all. So what happened to us? Well, we became a little reserved, but at times emotional. We are sedate, but at times quite argumentative. We are all adventurous. We are all decisive. We are certainly all determined. And speaking for his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they are all brilliant. So, lastly, I would like to impart one final lesson from my father, and that is describe him as a devout Jew who really loved doing mitzvot. Now, you might think that he loved doing some of the more easy mitzvahs, making Kiddush on Shabbos, or one of the more practical mitzvot of honoring your mother and your father. But my father liked the difficult ones, right? The ones that we would call all ha-mitzvot, the burden of mitzvot. He loved to wake up for slichas on Yom Noraim. We're not talking about the slichas at 10:30 or 11 o'clock. We're talking the 1 a.m. slichas with a full shul, with Chazan Manny Stein singing his heart out. He loved tefillah on Rosh Hashanah. He loved it so much, he was there from the beginning of Shir HaYichud to the end of Aleinu. And he would sometimes be the Chazan from Sukkah to Zimra. He loved building his sukkah. Not the sukkah that was on the ground in Lawrence, but the sukkah that was perched up on our porch. The blue tarp sukkah that was so difficult because it literally covered our entire porch and you were hanging over the end as you were putting it up. And that even survived a nor'easter once in Far Rockaway. He loved quickly eating two kazesim and matzah, shmur matzah at the Seder, the giant cardboards that I made with an oversized kazayas. He loved Kiddush Levana. We were all ready to go home after Marav on Shabbos. He was still saying Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. But the thing that I remember most, and the mitzvah that I think my father loved the most, was Birkat HaMazon. When you invited my father over to a Sunday meal, you had to have bread. Every meal was a Suda, and he had to say Birkat HaMazon after the meal. And I think it's because Birkat HaMazon basically stated the synopsis of his beliefs. Kuel Zan Ufarnes Lakol. He is the God who nourishes and sustained all. Al Shinchalta Lavotenu, Eretz Chemda Tova Rachava. You have given our forefathers a desirable, good, and spacious land. Uvnei Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh B'Mimra Yamenu. You will rebuild Jerusalem, the holy city, in our days. And the ultimate description of my father, Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach B'Hashem V'Haya Hashem Yiftacho. Blessed is the man who trusts in Hashem, then Hashem will be his security. This is the Abba that I remember. So on behalf of Esti, my daughter Dalia, her chassan Rab Binyamin, their children Akiva, Rivka, Moshe, Shifra, Shana, and my sons Yoni and Mark. So Abba, I ask Mechila if we have ever treated you with disrespect or with disinterest, and we'll all honor you, we respect you, We love you, we are always proud of you, and we will miss you.
Hello.
I'd like to start with a little disclaimer. My father really thought both my brothers should be rabbis, but not me. I was the doctor. Thank you, everyone, for being here to pay tribute to our father, David Pinchas ben Zarach Dov. It means a lot to me to see all of you here. It means a lot to me that everyone asked how Tammy's doing, and Baruch Hashem, she's getting better every day. Tamar Leah Bat Miriam, everyone should have her in their prayers. And in a very short time, you'll see her running down the street again. I want to share with you a few brief memories that I have of my father. And I definitely learned a lot from my brothers, and I remember especially the cherry pie in Hebrew. Because that was about the only thing I said in Hebrew on those Friday nights. As I started writing this speech, I remembered way back to when I was a medical intern over 30 years ago. I was sitting in my father's office at Maimonides Medical Center a few short weeks after sitting Shiva for my mother. My son Darren had just been born, and I was trying to write a speech at my father's desk to deliver at Darren's bris. As I was writing, I couldn't stop crying. There literally were teardrops all over the paper. My father came into his office and asked me why I was crying, which was a pretty obvious question. Tears of joy and tears of sadness all mixed into one. At that time, my father told me over 30 years ago, "Don't worry. I will try to live to a much older age so you can celebrate the good life I had rather than cry so much over my death." He kept his promise, and I will keep his wish. We just read Parshat Lech Lecha, where God tells Abraham to get up and go to the land that I will show you, to the land of Israel. The gematria numerical value of the words Lech and Lecha are each 50. 50 and 50. God is telling Abraham that it's time for you to do your share of spreading the word of my presence in the world. It is time to follow my commandments. If you do your share, your 50%, I will do my share, my 50%, and you will be rewarded and your life will be blessed. Our father, our Abba, definitely, as you just heard, did more than his 50%. That was good, because he, gave a little extra for me. And his life was truly blessed. Blessed to be married to my mother for 33 years, and blessed to be married to Harriet for 29 years. Blessed with 3 sons and 3 amazing daughter-in-laws. Blessed with so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren that when they just said only family should be left in the room was still full. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and not even everybody's here. His life and his brilliance truly deserve to be celebrated. As you heard, my father was an extremely brilliant man. There were few questions that he didn't know the answer to, and these he would quickly look up in a book or a sefer. Google did not exist. My father was our Google. He loved teaching his grandchildren, and even more so his grandchildren. I remember watching my kids learn with their Saba Abba, as they called him, for their respective bar and bat mitzvahs. They may have mimicked shooting motions to their heads as they were learning, and their Saba was not looking, but they loved every minute of it, as did he. They even remember some of it. But the joy he had in those moments is something I will always cherish and will always remember. As most of you know, if you walk into a Bryk family function and ask for Dr. Bryk, you will get many responses. I was introduced to radiology, just like Joel as a child, on many happy days off from school that I would go to work with my father. I followed his footsteps and became a radiologist. As my brothers mentioned, I could always feel his pride, my father's pride, when I would discuss a complicated procedure that I would do. And was amazed that he even kept up his medical knowledge even after he retired. I could still discuss the procedure I did, and he knew exactly what I was doing, even though it was just created, the procedure, in the last few years. My father was not a big hugger, not a kisser, but we all knew he loved us very much. He didn't have to say it. We knew it and we felt it. It was always palpable. I love you, Abba. Tehi nafsho tzura b'torah chayim.
Memory is sometimes selective in a way we can't predict. It was mentioned that Dr. Bryk frequently led our davening Psukei de Zimra on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And so in the memory of what the sounds of Rosh Hashanah morning are like, I still, and I hope will for many years, hear your father's voice, as I will remember and continue to hear his voice in response to our learning. We studied Talmud together Shabbos afternoons for many, many years. But it was, as was mentioned, with devout sense of servants of God, being a true Eved Hashem, with which he davened, which he prayed every day. And thankfully he was able to, literally until just a few weeks ago. Concerning our tefillah, davening in the morning particularly, the Talmud in Maseches Brachos tells us that there is reference, at least a sense of guidance being given us, afforded us by a pasuk in the Torah about our morning prayer, where the Torah says, Lo tochlu al hadam. And it's understood, at least midrashically, to mean Lo tochlu kodem shetitpalalu al damchem, where the Torah says, don't eat on or with blood. The Torah means, or it's a reference to, don't have your breakfast without first praying. But note how it's almost draconian. Don't have breakfast before you are praying for your blood. The imagery is so drastic, so stark. Why so? Why talk about dam, about blood? The founder and great mover of the Hasidic movement, Rabbi Dov Ber, says that it's because in the name of man, Adam, we are essentially dam. We are blood. And that's all we are. And yes, blood, well, that's the lifeline. It's the lifeblood of all mammals, even fish. But what distinguishes man is that in addition to the Dalet and the Mem, there's an Aleph. And that Aleph stands for Alufo Shel Olam. As we know in modern Hebrew, an Aluf is a general, the ultimate leader, the source, the creator. Alufo Shel Olam. So the charge of man is to bring the Aluf, to join and to create a chibur, to come together with and become a part of his or her very dam. And then we have man. Then we have Adam. How does man bring the Alufo Shel Olam to be with his own blood and to be within him, to be coursing through his own veins? How do you bring the Aleph to the Dalet Mem to become Adam? That is prayer. That is tefillah. It's so formative. It creates out of mere dam, Adam. And that is what our rabbis are telling us when they say, Lo tochlu kodem shetitpalalu al damchem. Because you can turn yourself from mere dam to Adam, bringing Alufo Shel Olam to be a part of who you are. David Bryk brought Alufo Shel Olam. He brought the Great One to be a part of who he was. That's why he prayed with so much sincerity and verve. That's why it meant so much to him, and why he took his dat, his religion, and his religiousness so seriously. Yes, he understood Dam, and he would understand the manner in which blood courses through our veins, and he could see, literally. He could see, yes, with the MRI and the CAT scan and the X-ray, he could see so much inside. But what he brought inside, to his very own inside, to his innermost self, he brought Alufo Shel Olam. And that's why he became such a superb and such a complete mushlam. He was truly, as we have heard, an Adam Hashalem, a whole person, because he had everything that, as you heard, God could ask of us. Rational thinking, working hard, using his mind, his intelligence, sharing what he could, teach to others, especially his own, his loved ones, but always with bringing Alufo Shel Olam, bringing the Aleph, to be with his self personally and children in their dam, to create and be Adam, a great man. For he was a great man, a great husband, a great brother, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and personally, a great friend. I will miss him dearly. We will conclude this Kavod Achron with first the paragraph of Tehillim led by Rabbi Shalom Axelrod. Then I would ask we all please rise for the Kel Malei Rachamim. First the Tehillim.
Shir Malos, Makim Korsicha Adonai. Adonai Shema B'Koli, Tiyeno Asnecha Kashuvos, L'Kol Tachanunai. Im Avonos Tishmaya Adonai Miyamod. Ki Mecha Slicha L'man Tibarei. Ki Visi Adonai Ki B'Sor Nafshi V'Lidbro Hakolti. Nafshi L'Adonai Mishomrim L'Aboker Shomrim L'Aboker. Yachel Yisrael El Adonai Ki Adonai HaChesed V'Habei Mofidus. Who Yiftes Yisrael Nikol Avonosav.
We will have an opportunity to walk behind and be Malava, the Aron, the Niftar. The Kvura burial will be in Eretz Yisrael, in the Bet Almin, Eretz HaChaim, near Bet Shemesh, tomorrow, Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. Following the Kvura, Eli, Hillel, and Joe will be observing Shiva at the home of Rabbi Eli Reich, 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 9, from 5 to 9 at Rehov Sapir 36 in Nof Ayalon. Beginning this late morning, Harriet Bryk and Esther Slakowski will be beginning to observe Shiva till tomorrow evening at 5517 Cedarhurst Avenue in Cedarhurst. Beginning Tuesday morning, when David's sons will return, all the Avelim will observe Shiva at 234 Briarwood Crossing in Lawrence. Harriet Bryk and Esther Slakowski until Shabbat, sons Eli, Joel, and Hillel until Sunday morning, a week from today. There will not be minyanim at 5517 Cedarhurst Avenue today and tomorrow. Minyanim begin Tuesday morning. Shachar is 7:30 this week, 8:30 next Sunday, and Mincha Maariv each evening at 5:50 p.m. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Haskell Luxstein to recite the Kel Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamaromim, Hamtzei menucha nechono al kanfei hashechino. B'malos kadoshim utahorim kazohar harakia mazhirim. Lenishmas Reb David Pinchas ben Reb Zorach Dov sheholach leolamo. Bavur shanachnu mispalalim biyad nishmaso. Began Eden tehei menuchaso. Lochein ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seiser kanavav leolamim. V'yitzrar b'tzrar hachayim es nishmaso. Adonai hu nachaloso. V'yanuach v'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen.
I'll ask the grandsons to please step forward. Swing the arms, correct.
What?
Swing, just keep everything as is. Just swing the arm toward me. That's right. That's it. Straight out. Oshe b'tzei no yom tzosha v'nifrona. Amor le'machsim v'sudosi Allah yasakol ki yasak mitach yakush. Gab havetz le'busal yasakol. Sachas v'naf mitachas yasakol. Keramitar. Yasivi tachadom mechem tziruf yomon. Yachol v'yal v'shet v'yoshem soroy. Yikom yal v'levon v'yanacha v'yachol v'yigosh. Rak v'nefes avish v'mishim v'mashim sharif direk. Ki ata Adonai machsim. Elion samtlem anecho. Sooner alecho la'o. V'nega lo yikraf la'alecho. Ki malacho yitzav elo. Lishmarcho b'chol diraka.